and we're ready to go. So unmute yourself, Randy, and let's rock.
Okay, well, good afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, who, by the way, I found out grew up in New York, not very far from where I grew up in New York. You know that our world is changing, and many of us are unaware that planning is vitally needed in our digital world before life-changing events occur, and I'm sure Mark has shared a few of those with us. What happens to the records you or your business or your family have on file after these events? Betsy's talk today shares information about the risks to you, your family, your business, especially if you're a lawyer, business, or financial advisor. Pervasive electronic fraud is evident and increasing in our virtual and digital age. Betsy's a veteran in the world of software, starting with founding Operations Control Systems, a software company providing performance and security service to the top Fortune 50 companies. As the first female manager at IBM Canada, Betsy was a role model for other businesswomen seeking sales and engineering leadership positions at high-tech firms in North America. She's been awarded and recognized in a variety of areas, including Silicon Valley Businesswoman of the Year, 2019 Alaska Bar Association, Realty, Property, and Trust Estate section, Worldwide Family Office Magazine. Betsy was one of the 2018 Technology Innovation Keynote Speakers for the U.S. Army War College at the 2018 Naples Conference on Aging, and a featured speaker about biometric identification at Washington, D.C.'s CIA-led security symposium. Her published articles include grave robbing in the 21st century, and I guess I want to hear how that fits in. So would you please welcome Betsy Ehrenberg. You're muted. Lower left.
Okay. Share. And start. Can everyone see that? Protecting. Okay. Can you hear me now? Got it? I'm going to be talking about protecting digital property.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Yes or no? Okay. I'm going to be talking about protecting.
Yes.
No? All right.
No, we can hear you, Betsy. You're fine. I don't know what that noise. I think Lloyd's got something wonky going on because he keeps popping in.
Oh, okay.
I keep saying yes. I keep saying yes. I can hear you. I can see it.
All right. I'm going to start off by talking about what is digital property. When I first started looking into this whole issue, I thought it was just cryptocurrency. And then I realized, well, maybe it's just my social media. Maybe it's just my emails. And it turned out that the ABA had given a definition to what is digital property: an electronic record in which an individual has a right or interest. But the term does not include the underlying asset unless it is the electronic record and it is a digital asset. So in this particular case, if you have a bank account, the record is a digital asset. The actual money is not the digital asset at all. However, if you have photographs, they are digital assets because it's the only way we can see them. The actual legislation that took place or was passed is called the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act. The attorneys call this RUFADA, and it is legislation that must be passed in every state to allow a fiduciary to treat a digital asset the same way you treat a tangible asset. And prior to this legislation, if there had been a death and the decedent had cryptocurrency, or the decedent's family wanted to get to their photographs, the people who held those photographs could say, you don't have the right to them because when you signed on to Facebook and you started posting pictures, you agreed to their terms of service agreement. And in those terms, it basically said, you put anything on Facebook, it belongs to us. Some examples are the documents and the manuscripts. College professors have a lot of manuscripts, and personal computers have a lot of data on them as well. And I'm going to share with you a story that when I tried to get all the assets from Google and all the assets from Apple as well, I won, and the custodian, the fiduciary got their information. So the digital property information is all over the place. Most people under 65 have more than 160 different accounts. Yesterday, I was speaking to somebody in London who had heard me speak there last November. And he said, when you first told me that I had more than 160 accounts, I couldn't believe that I did. So I started writing them down. And when I started writing them down, I realized that every application on my phone meant that somebody had my email address, my credentials, probably my phone number. For some of the obvious ones like insurance, it's pretty clear that they have records about you. Pandora is on your phone. And if you are a subscriber, that means Pandora is collecting money from you every month. Four Seasons is an example of obviously a hotel, and many people go to hotels and get reward points. The same with eBay. You can sell a lot of things. I got a phone call on a Sunday morning asking me, how can the fiduciary get access to the eBay account that had $40,000 sitting in it? That was a pretty big challenge, but we came along with it. This particular diagram is for LifeLock, a very popular digital property protector that checks your credit cards constantly and to prevent identity theft. However, as of date of death, LifeLock no longer protects anything. Some digital assets have a lot of value. About 6 months ago, I was asked to work with the fiduciary to actually transfer the 500,000 reward points to one of the beneficiaries. Yes, there was a lot of money in bank accounts, but this particular beneficiary, the sister of the decedent, wanted those airline miles. When we first contacted Southwest, the person on the phone said, we don't have to transfer them. And I said, yes, you do. Here is the law. Here is the bill number in the state of Texas, and you must transfer them. And they did. So what is the particular risk associated with digital property sitting on computers after a person passes away or when they're even alive? Over 2.5 million people report identity theft. But the bigger number is 327,000 cases of identity theft are reported to the FTC every year, where the fraudster impersonated the decedent. $58 billion in assets, insurance policies, bank accounts, abandoned money, royalties are reported every single year to eat in a collection by each state. The identity theft problem after a person dies is very real. This is what happens. The fraudster looks at an obituary, figures out what the name is, goes to social media, picks up pictures from LinkedIn and Facebook, creates a new persona within 10 days of the death, before Social Security has been notified, before the banks have been notified, and then that fraudster starts applying for credit cards. And the credit reporting companies don't know that this fraudster who's impersonating a decedent, they don't know that the decedent is dead, so they start issuing credit cards. Then the fraudster charges amounts of money under $8,000. And as long as the fraudster stays under $8,000, no bank, no consumer, nobody's going to notice that. And then if the decedent had automatic payments for credit cards coming out of a checking account, that just continues because it can take a very long time before the banks are even notified. This can happen, by the way, anywhere and anytime. So here are the kinds of problems that we have encountered, where the obituary says the decedent had been an executive at Charles Schwab. And it doesn't take long for a fraudster to pick up enough information from the deep web and the dark web to impersonate the decedent. Bill payments continue, so that if a person had Netflix, well, it isn't a big subscription, it continues going out of the bank account and into Netflix. Well, what if those bills are your credit cards and there's a charge of $20,000 every month? Again, those get paid automatically, or the fraudster takes them. Text messages can be picked up, subscriptions keep on going on, and just about anyone can access digital assets. And that's sad to know, but it's true. It isn't very difficult. When I shared the story about the fraudster reading the obituary, picking up Facebook, creating a new persona, that happens a lot, over 13% of the time. We were called in to a situation in Silicon Valley where the decedent was worth $40 million. And the fraudster systematically took chunks of money out of different accounts, and both in brokerage houses as well as in banks. The most important problem with digital assets has to do with your Apple ID and the security associated with getting any information off a phone or stored somewhere through the phone. And I spent from February till end of March arguing with Apple, asking them to deliver all the information that they had associated with an Apple ID to the fiduciary. And they started telling me that since the decedent was in Tennessee and they were in California, they were not obligated to transfer the information from California to Tennessee. Well, I pointed out to them that according to Assembly Bill 691 that was passed in California, they had to follow and handle the request of the fiduciary. So the attorney at Apple said, well, when was that law passed? Remember, this was February 2020. I said, April of 2016. And then suddenly there was silence. And I said, now, why are you holding this up and not giving that information to the fiduciary? And there was a lot of pausing and a lot of back and forth until I finally spoke to the general counsel of Apple. I said, you must not allow your 1,200 attorneys to stand in the way of a fiduciary getting access to Apple information. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and it's cruel. When I said cruel, suddenly the information was transferred within 48 hours. Music, iTunes library is another digital asset that people have. A lot of times one will not realize that the contact lists that a person has are digital property and can be very valuable to the person. As far as social media, what happened? Okay. Social media is also very valuable. So what is in the estate? As an insurance agent, as a financial advisor, I am sure that you look at assets of an individual and try to protect them. Email is not necessarily something you ever think of protecting, but it is very valuable. For finance, those accounts are pretty straightforward. They can be the bank account, the brokerage account, the credit cards, the credit reporting companies, the credit unions. However, in financial, there's also PayPal that has a lot of money sitting in it, or an eBay account that has a lot of money. So financial isn't necessarily just those traditional bank accounts that we know about. Insurance is another area, and I know a number of you actually sell insurance policies. A lot of insurance policies go unclaimed. And the insurance companies now by law have to turn them over to the states and to a separate account. Later on in this presentation, I will give you the name of the website where you can search for unclaimed insurance policies. Shopping are some of those sites where you don't even think about them and might not be terribly important. But the shopping can usually be found by looking at a decedent's cell phone. Housing are all that information dealing with property and tax bills and notifying the different custodians that the records they have on file belong to a deceased person. In government, we know there are a lot of digital assets, such as a passport. And in speaking to people about what do you do with a passport after a person passes away, they say, what's the difference? I don't have to do anything with it. It'll expire in 10 years. Well, that's not the best idea, especially when fraudsters want to pick up passports and they're very easy to copy. Other government records include driver's licenses, TSA, firearms. In New York State, a law passed in 2016 that said, if a fiduciary does not notify the state police within 15 days of the death of a person who had a registered firearm, the fiduciary has committed a felony. 2016, 4 years ago. The attorneys and the professional fiduciaries in New York State are very careful to speak to the successors and explain, ask them whether there were any registered firearms. In the area of automotive, there are a lot of documents associated with purchasing an automobile, whether it's new or pre-owned. And we discovered that the typical way people buy a car, they buy the car, they sign some documents, the salesperson hands them a pile of papers, they go out to their car, they stick it in the glove compartment, and 3 years later, when they lose the key to their car, they remember that they had insurance for that key, but they don't know where the paper is. So what happens is that they end up calling the dealership, and the dealerships in the United States are required by law to keep all their records for 7 years, exactly the same as medical records. So the dealership doesn't have the warranty anywhere. They have to find that exact paper. And what we have realized is that if you can take all those papers, make them into digital assets, then they will be accessible to the driver. Social is another category of information that is almost 100% digital assets. So the question might be, does your CPA, your wealth advisor, your insurance agent, your tax preparer know how to gain access to all your digital assets upon death or disability? In the olden days, executors or fiduciaries or personal representatives, different names in different states, used to go to mailboxes. used to go to file cabinets and look for old copies of taxes. Well, they can't do that anymore. But there is mail. It's just email. And there are folders, and they're sitting on people's computers. And then the taxes are mostly submitted electronically. But there is the same form to get a copy of taxes when a person is alive or after they've passed away. And in using that form to get copies of taxes after a person passes away, you just have to submit to the IRS proof that you have a right to get to that particular asset. Now, here's where the scavenger hunt is. If you look down, number 5, search for uncollected insurance policies. You just go to that particular website, put in the name of the person, and you should be able to find out whether there are any pension plans, annuities, or even policies that were never cashed in. Abandoned property and abandoned money, there's a website called Missing Money. You can go on that, put in your name, Betsy Ehrenberg, Santa Fe, it didn't find anything. Betsy Ehrenberg, Palo Alto, California. Oh yeah, I found $250 that a title company had sent a check, but I never cashed it. So they were required by law to turn it over to the state, in that case, the Secretary of State in California. Locating patents and trademarks is easier today than it has ever been. The US Patent and Trademark Office, uspto.gov, created a portal that would allow attorneys, fiduciaries, and individuals themselves to look up in their records by a person's name whether they had any patents or any trademarks. Because successors don't always know that. They can know that their spouse was very smart, their dad was a genius, but had no idea that dad or spouse was in fact getting royalties on some patents or had protected some trademarks. So I'm unfamiliar with this. Another way one can go and find digital property is through the Social Security, SSA.gov. You can just put in minimal information about a person alive or past, and you can find out whether they were entitled to or collecting Medicare. Now, Medicare is very interesting. I'm going to share a story. A person passed and they were getting the funeral home, got the gift certificates, they sent it to Social Security. Social Security knew that they were depositing a check once a month into Bank of America. So they contacted Bank of America and said, the records you have on file belong to a deceased person. Bank of America locked that account before the fiduciary, the sons, the daughters, the spouses ever realized that the account was locked. So as a result of finding out that information, I suggest to people that if they are on Medicare and they are getting monies deposited into an account, they should have an account that only gets that money. And then automatically, maybe 5 days after it's deposited, take that money and put it into your working account. You don't want, and your successors don't want, all your bank accounts to be closed or all your access to money to be restricted because of Social Security. The other thing that I have discovered is that people don't want to be on the internet anymore. So there's a company in Boston called Abine that has a product called Delete Me, and for $129, they will find all the places a person's name is on different sites, in social media and phone books, and demand that the custodian remove that name from their site. And they have to do it by law. It just shouldn't be so difficult after a person passes away or gets disabled to have to go to all these different sites or have assets that are unprotected. So when we spoke and had those introductions, a number of you said it's important to have an inventory and a legacy vault. And I think it's Karen who had this wonderful book that you have people fill out. And Edward Jones has a form that people fill out, and Wells Fargo. Most large financial and insurance and investment companies have forms that people fill out. What I have discovered is that they also ask people to write down the passwords that belong to an account or the secret answers that have to be given. And in doing your inventory, if you do it today, everything you put in there probably is complete, and probably is correct, and it's definitely current because you did it today. But 6 months from now, will that list be accurate? If a person passes, the custodians do not require passwords in order for a fiduciary to gain access to the electronic records and the digital assets belonging to the decedent. So my message to you is it's a great idea if people want to make lists and Excel spreadsheets or use products that say, here's my user ID, here's my password for this particular account. However, if their intention is when they pass away, that the fiduciary will use that list in order to gain access to assets, using that list for that purpose is against the law. It is specifically called out in every state. It says the fiduciary cannot impersonate a user. So there's also a federal law as well. So it's great if people create an inventory, and part of that inventory are password lists, but be clear as to why you're doing it, because passwords and secret answers are not needed to gain access to accounts that belong to deceased people. Part of your inventory, as several of you know, is all the estate planning documents, the wills, the trusts, letters, inventories, what you want to have happen. Those trust documents are very, very important. And it's a good idea to know where they are electronically as well in a paper form if you know where that is. At this point, when you are trying to keep track of things, you'll probably remember that if you cannot remember your password and all you have is a user ID, the company will say, I just sent a special code to your smartphone. Well, if the person has passed away, who can get into that phone? So in this inventory, probably one of the most important pieces of information is telling people, what is your secret code to turn on your smartphone? Without that, it's a lot of jumping through hoops, trying to be able to satisfy the needs of custodians with multi-factor authentication. You've probably heard that word a lot. For those of you who have not heard it, The first factor is the password, something you know. The second factor is something you have. You have your smartphone. That's what makes it so powerful. Another kind of thing that you have is your fingerprint. So multi-factor doesn't mean that you have to know 2 passwords or you have to know multiple answers to questions, although that's nice. That's something you know. But what makes it really valuable is for you to understand that it's something you're holding, something you have. I found out recently that, and I shared the story about Social Security automatically notifying banks if the decedent was in fact collecting money. What I also learned is that Social Security notifies TransUnion Credit Reporting Company. And that is a great thing to know. They do not notify Experian, they do not notify Equifax, they only notify TransUnion because it is the only credit reporting company that they trust as far as security. Also, TransUnion, you believe, has a little bit of information, and that's the tip of the iceberg. It actually has a lot of information about people. So in creating an inventory, creating a legacy vault, there are open-ended challenges because tomorrow there's going to be another hot app they're going to put on your phone. And what you want to do is to do some planning. And here are 5 steps. Number 1, will the fiduciary be able to get access with the different technology? Secondly, and for those of you who are doing estate planning, are all the documents containing language that specifically authorizes the fiduciary to have access to digital property? It is sometimes called a digital fiduciary. It's sometimes called a digital executor. And the reason we use words interchangeably is because every state has their own name for the person who is responsible for the estate after an individual has passed away. In New Mexico, it's called the personal representative. In New York, it's called the fiduciary. I don't know what it's called in Texas, but you do. Probably the executor. One of the things that should be in the estate plan documents, the wills and the trust documents, is calling out the name of who the fiduciary access is. If the person you are writing these documents about want to state that the executor for my cryptocurrency is person A, but the executor to my other digital assets is person B, some people do that. So they're very, very specific. But it is important that all those documents call out a digital fiduciary or a digital executor and probably say they have access and control, but they also have the right to hire somebody to help them. When you are doing planning, whether it's insurance or trust documents or financial planning, it's always good to have a conversation about digital property. And I worked on an account recently where the decedent had an entire library of photographs that the family knew nothing about. But I was hired to find all the digital property of the decedent. So the easy thing to do was to look up Facebook. And when I got on Facebook, there was a little note on the account that said, check out my other site. And the other site was a site where the decedent had beautiful photographs, landscapes that he was selling. The family never knew he was selling it. The decedent was an attorney. So it wasn't, a fly-by-night person. But he also was a wonderful photographer. And so it's important to go over all these different things with your clients. And in talking and doing the planning, you really want to make sure you have some detailed instructions. When I say one service gets it done, it's the company I founded, Legacy Concierge. So in this particular case, the message for today is 3 things. Number 1, there is digital property and you have it, your family has it, your clients have it. Don't ignore it. It is not just social media. It could be cryptocurrency. It could be your PayPal account. It could be your eBay account or an Amazon account where you're selling stuff as well as buying things. It could be the library of photographs that are so valuable to you. It can be a number of things. It can be that spreadsheet that talks about your musical instrument collection, that outlines all those musical instruments, where you bought them, how much they're worth, who you would like to give them to should you pass. So spreadsheets are very, very valuable. And you want to remind yourself, but also your clients, to protect them. So there I am, if you want to get in touch with me. And at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Okay, so if you have a question, I'm not going to do it. So Betsy, your mic is still open, and if you have a question, just unmute yourself and then do me a favor and remute yourself when your question's done.
Betsy, you talked about the bank locking the account from the Social Security notification. Would that happen if that account had been a joint account?
Yes, they don't care. It's
Really?
wherever they deposited money. They don't know that it's a joint account.
But would the bank lock it?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
That's a nightmare. Okay, and that when I heard about that, that's why I opened up a separate little account just to collect Social Security.
You mentioned the government reports the TransUnion. Would you recommend the executor or fiduciary, depending upon the state, contact the other reporting agencies to see if to go ahead and report that death?
They absolutely should.
Yes.
I have a checklist that I'm happy to send out to you. 50 things that should be done by the fiduciary. And what I can do is to send it to Dave, and he can send it to all of you. And it's really a step-by-step in friendly terms. And step 50 is, you did a great job, go on vacation. So, but steps 1 through 49 are very, very specific of who you call, what you do. Voter registration, get people off the voter registration. It's so easy to do. In New Mexico, there are 39 counties. So you had to contact the county in which the person lived. Finally, a year ago, they said the Secretary of State will have all the information about voter registration. You don't have to go. However, if a person registered to vote in New Rochelle, New York, you have to physically go into voter registration. That's nuts.
Okay, so let's see. I'll go with Patricia, and you started to ask a question, then I had Damien, and then that probably will get us to where we'll have to land the plane.
Well, one thing I'm going to say, Betsy, is the information you were giving is absolutely fantastic. I know when my parents were in for dementia, eventually Alzheimer's, I had to take over all of the financial situations. I am still getting some mail to my dad who passed 13 years ago. And I only know where it came from because I had changed from just my regular name to put my maiden name in so I could sign on all their documents. And it's very important, especially to get to those credit agencies immediately to let them know that the person is deceased. Thank you for the reminder and the wonderful information. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
If you stay interstate, it's even worse.
Yeah. Okay.
What did you say?
I said if a person dies without a will, it's even worse.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's keep Steve. Let's go. Damien, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, thanks for the information. And what I'm gathering here is it sounds like because my mom is, over 60, and even some of my aunts and my uncles who are, nearing retirement, I should probably talk to them about developing a plan where we put these Excel spreadsheets into place, because I have seen how, the older siblings in the family, when, grandparents die, great aunts and uncles, there's so much confusion that comes out of those situations because it hasn't been planned for. So I really like that simplified process. I think I'm actually going to start having this discussion with my mother this weekend about this.
One of the things that I have learned, because people have so many assets, if you ask them to, why don't you write everything down? They're not going to. So if you just start off very, very small, okay, why don't you tell me all the places you have bank accounts? Okay, that was good. Mom, I know you have some insurance policies. Where are those? And because if you ask somebody to try to figure this out, they're going to give up immediately. I've given up. The good news is I created a beautiful user screens that makes it very easy for people to just eat the elephant a bite at a time.
Right.
Yeah, thanks,
like
Betsy. I really appreciate it. And I think we should give Betsy a hand here. That was awesome. One of the things, I know she's kind of talked about people dying and the information, but when Betsy and I talked, I shared with her when I went through, I retired back in 2005, and I went through, and I don't even remember how I stumbled into this information about assets digitally, assets that I didn't know about. And I literally had over $20,000 worth of assets. I wasn't dead yet. Okay. I had like $20,000 of assets that were out there, checks that had been sent to me, money that I was supposed to have gotten. And I didn't even know I was missing it. So, it's Damien, talking to your old parents, and by the way, 60 or whatever isn't old. So don't even go there with me, buddy, because the next time I see you in the hall, you're in trouble. But, so that's not old, but I was like 15 years younger than I am now, and it really wasn't even on my radar, and I stumbled into this. So this is something that we have to realize is there's a lot of information when you think about it. And so anyway, I thought it was worth us considering now that we're in lockdown to some degree or whatever, and we're trying to do things. It was probably not a bad time to, go back through your files, possibly look at the tool that Betsy has, or just really become aware, and not only yourself, but those in your life that can do it, and especially the financial folks on here. If you're really going to help the fiduciary aspects of your clients, this could be a huge value add. So I encourage you to think about it that way as well, Luke and Alan and Tiffany and all the other folks that are here, kind of helping people manage their financial assets throughout in a total life cycle. It's not a bad thing to do. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to mention that our company is very willing to give away an electronic vault to each one of you. All you need to do is to send me your email, and we will send you a logon so you can create your own electronic vault. So you could do this for yourself. And again, you may say, I just want to upload a whole bunch of documents, my spreadsheets about my musical instruments, and all the property I own. or you might want to put in your bank accounts. Never put in passwords. Don't put in social security numbers. Everything is very secure, but there's no reason to ever put a password into an inventory for the purpose of keeping track of everything you have. If a person dies or if they're disabled, you do not need a password.
Thanks, Betsy. That was awesome. And like I said, there's a lot to chew on here, and I appreciate that's a very generous offer. So I'll make sure that we get that communicated. I'll share anything Betsy shares as far as links or websites or whatever in the Facebook group when we will be posting a recording of this Zoom. And so I will share any of those in the comments or the stream on that posting of the recording of the